Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Without further ado, returning to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn as read by Lord Naren White. The men ripped around a while and then rode away. As soon as they was out of sight, I sung out to Buck and told him. He didn't know what to make of my voice coming out of the tree at first. He was awful surprised. He told me to watch out sharp and let him know when the men come in sight again, and said they was up to some devilment or other. Wouldn't be gone long. I wished I was out of that tree, but I doesn't come down. Buck begun to cry and rip, and load that him and his cousin Joe, that was the other chap, would make for this day yet. He said his father and his two brothers was killed, and 2 or 3 of the enemy. Said the Shepherdsons laid for them in ambush. Buck said his father and brothers ought to waited for their relations. The Shepherdsons was too strong for them. I asked him what was become of Harney and Miss Sophia. He said they'd got across the river and was safe. I was glad of that. But the way Buck did take on because he didn't manage to kill Harney that day he shot at him. I ain't ever heard of anything like it. All of a sudden, bang, 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 goes 3 or 4 guns. The men had slipped around through the woods and come in from behind without their horses. The boys jumped for the river, both of them hurt, and as they swum down the current, the men run along the bank shooting at them and singing out, "Kill them! Kill them!" It made me so sick I almost fell out of the tree. I ain't going to tell all that happened. It would make me sick again if I was to do that, and I wished I hadn't ever come ashore that night to see such things. I ain't ever gonna get shut off them. Lots of times I dream about them. I stayed in the tree till it begun to get dark, afraid to come down. Sometimes I heard guns away off in the woods, and twice I seen little gangs of men gallop past the log store with guns. So I reckoned the trouble was still a going on. I was mighty downhearted, so I made up my mind I wouldn't ever go near that house again, because I reckoned I was to blame somehow. I judged that the piece of paper meant that Miss Sophia was to meet Harney somewheres at 2:30 and run off, and I judged I ought to told her father about that paper, and the curious way she acted, and then maybe he would 'a' locked her up, and this awful mess wouldn't ever happened. When I got down out of the tree, I crept along down the river bank a piece, and found the 2 bodies laying in the edge of the water, and tugged at them till I got them ashore. Then I covered up their faces, and got away as quick as I could. I cried a little when I was covering up Buck's face, for he was mighty good to me. It was just dark now. I never went near the house, but struck through the woods and made for the swamp. Jim warn't on his island, so I tramped off in a hurry for the creek, and crowded through the willows, red hot to jump aboard and get out of that awful country. The raft was gone. My souls, but I was scared. I couldn't get my breath for most a minute. Then I raised a yell. A voice not 25 foot from me says, "Good land, is that you, honey? Don't make no noise." It was Jim's voice. Nothing ever sounded so good before. I run along the bank a piece and got aboard, And Jim, he grabbed me and hugged me. He was so glad to see me. He says, "Laws bless you, child. I's right down, so show you's dead again. Jack's been he's been hit. He says he reckon you's been shot, case you didn't come home no more. So I just this minute is starting to raft down towards the mouth of the creek, so as to be ready to be all ready for to shove out, and leave soon as Jack comes again and tells me for certain you is dead. Lawsy, I'm mighty glad to see you again, honey." I says, "All right, that's mighty good. They won't find me, and they'll think I've been killed, and floated down the river. There's something up there that'll help them think so. So don't you lose no time, Jim, but just shove off for the big water as fast as ever you can." I never felt easy till the raft was 2 miles below there and out in the middle of the Mississippi. Then we hung up our signal lantern and judged that we was free and safe once more. I hadn't a bite to eat since yesterday. So Jim, he got out some corn dodgers and buttermilk and pork and cabbage and greens. There ain't nothing in the world so good when it's cooked right. And whilst I eat my supper, we talked and had a good time. I was powerful glad to get away from the feuds, and so was Jim to get away from the swamp. We said there was no home like a raft after all. Other places do seem cramped up and smothery, but a raft don't. You feel mighty free and easy and comfortable on a raft. Chapter 19. 2 or 3 days and nights went by. I reckon I might say they swum by. They slid along so quiet and smooth and lovely. Here's the way we put in the time. It was a monstrous big river down there, sometimes 1.5 miles wide. We run nights and laid up and hid daytimes. Soon as night was gone most, we stopped navigating and tied up, nearly always in the dead water under a towhead, and then cut young cottonwoods and willows and hid the raft with them. Then we set out the lines. Next we slid into the river and had a swim, so as to freshen up and cool off. Then we sat down on the sandy bottom where the water was about knee deep and watched the daylight come. Not a sound anywheres, perfectly still, just like the whole world was asleep, only sometimes the bullfrogs a-cluttering, maybe. The first thing to see, looking away over the water, was a kind of dull line. That was the woods on the other side. You couldn't make nothing else out. Then a pale place in the sky, the more paleness spreading around. Then the river softened up a way off, and weren't black any more, but gray. You could see little dark spots drifting along ever so far away, trading scows and such things, and long black streaks, rafts. Sometimes you could hear a sweep squeaking, or jumbled up, voices. It was so still, and sounds come so far. And by you could see a streak on the water, which you know by the looks of the streak, that there's a snag there in a swift current which breaks on it and makes that streak look that way. And you see the mist curl up off of the water, and the east reddens up, and the river, and you make out a log cabin in the edge of the woods, away on the bank on the other side of the river, being a woodyard, likely, and piled by them cheats, so you can throw a dog through it anywheres. Then the nice breeze springs up, and come fanning from you over there, so cool and fresh and sweet to smell on account of the woods, and the flowers, but sometimes not that way, because they've left dead fish laying round gars and such, and they do get pretty rank. And next you've got the full day, and everything smiling in the sun, and the songbirds just going it. A little smoke couldn't be noticed now, so we would take some fish off of the lines and cook up a hot breakfast, and afterwards we would watch the lonesomeness of the river, and kind of lazy along, and by lazy off to sleep. Wake up by and look to see what done it, and maybe see a steamboat coughing along up a stream. So far off towards the other side, you couldn't tell nothing about her, only whether she was a stern wheel or side wheel. Then, for about an hour, there wouldn't be nothing to near to hear nor nothing to see, just solid lonesomeness. Next, you'd see a raft sliding by away off yonder, and maybe a galoot on it chopping, because they're most always doing it on a raft. You'd see the axe flash and come down. You don't hear nothing. You don't see that axe go up again. And by the time it's above the man's head, then you hear the ka-chunk. It had took all that time to come over the water. So we would put in the day lazing around, listening to the stillness. Once there was a thick fog, and the rafts and things that went by was beating tin pans so the steamboats wouldn't run over them. A scow or a raft went by so close we could hear them talking and cussing and laughing, heard them plain, but we couldn't see no sign of them. It made you feel crawly. It was like spirits carrying on that way in the air. Jim said he believed it was spirits, but I says. And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.